Welcome to the Eternal ROI podcast, where we share the real stories of workplace transformation. And now, here are your hosts, Will Stewart and Chris Patton.
Welcome to the Eternal ROI podcast. Good to have everybody watching and listening along. I'm Will Stewart, joined as always by Chris Patton, CEO of His Way at Work. Hey, Chris.
Will, how are you doing today?
Doing great. You know, we've talked to a lot of people. Now we have someone with kind of a unique perspective.
This is going to be a good, we say this every time, but I mean it. I mean it this time. This is going to be a good episode, Will. We've got Jenna Roach here from Betenbough Companies in Lubbock, Texas. If anybody remembers prior episodes, we've spoken with Rick and Holly Betenbough separately. Jenna is marketing director for their various companies. So she's been with the company, I believe the organization, for about 15 years and has some incredible stories to tell. So I say we let her do the talking and we just kind of...
It'll be a better show that way, I think.
No doubt.
Jenna, welcome to the show.
Thank y'all so much for having me. What an honor.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. I know you have a very unique story. I'm not going to do any spoilers, so I'll just kind of let you start. But what was your kind of interaction with Betenbough Homes, and how did that all start?
Well, I'm just a small town girl in Texas, and I went to Texas Tech University and eventually made my way to Dallas, Texas, where I worked at a PR agency. We did a lot of consumer retail PR. My boyfriend at the time decided he was going to go back to school in the West Texas area and proposed and left 2 days later to move back to Lubbock, Texas. And so life was really changing. And I had friends that were in the advertising world in Lubbock and asked them if they knew of any jobs for a PR person. At the time in Lubbock, Texas, there just weren't many jobs at all. And so I knew that that was going to be tough for me to find, but I could feel that that was something I was gifted at, was PR and marketing, and I was really enjoying it. And one night, August of 2006, our friend sent me a job description for a home builder I had actually never heard of. And so I started asking around, who is Betenbough Homes? Found out one of my best friends from childhood actually lived in a Betenbough home in Lubbock, Texas. And so spent my night applying for this role and started mid-October of 2006. So I have been with the company almost 15 years. Wow. I think we sold and closed about 200 to 250 homes my first year here. Wow. Closed about 1,700 this year.
Wow.
And so I've gotten to grow in more ways than I could count. But my background is I grew up in the Catholic Church. We were military. And so oftentimes, too, priests come and go because they get stationed at your Air Force base and then they leave. So we didn't really have a lot of relationship in our church. Our family just went to church and that's what we did. And I was at CCD every week. I did all of the sacraments. I did everything that a good Catholic girl is supposed to do. And then I went off to college. And I don't know if I stepped into church more than twice in college. And maybe that was because I was at Christmas Mass with my family. And so for me, I would say my background is really just a lot of religion, things to do, kind of a checklist. And that brought a lot of shame and guilt in so many ways when I did things that were just off course. And so really, that's what I stepped in here with, was a lot going on. When I came, my fiance at the time, he had just lost his mom to cancer. She had brain cancer, and from diagnosis to death was 5 weeks. The year prior, I had lost my dad. Yeah. And in the year later, I lost my dad. I'm sorry. And so we just had gone through a lot of things. But the Lord, now that I can look back on it, the Lord was showing up all along the way. And he brought me to Betenbough Homes. He set in my heart this passion for marketing and PR. I am one of 4 kids, but I'm the first person in my family to go to college. And so I didn't even know what public relations was or marketing when I came to Lubbock, Texas. I just chose the first class that I thought was fun, which was psychology, and went with it. And the Lord has just used all of those things all along the way. I remember when I was sitting and filling out my job application in August of 2006, it was a lengthy questionnaire. And I'm a writer, I'm a communicator. And I sat forever just writing that content. And I remember they said, hey, we love what you're doing, but we'd love to see something a little more creative. PR writing isn't always the most creative writing.
Mm.
And so they sent me one of the communities they were going to open up, and I had to write like a little creative piece for that community and why buyers should move to Bellamia Estates. And needless to say, I got hired about 6 weeks later, and I will never forget the first day I walked in this building. I met Ron Betenbough. He is Rick's dad, and they are co-founders of Betenbough Homes. And he said, Jenna, I read what you wrote, and it was amazing. I thought it was so good, I read it to the whole company.
Wow.
And, I always tell that story because it was just the minute I walked in the door. It was a kindness and a welcoming environment from day one. And you've probably heard Holly and Rick say, just come as you are.
Sure.
I felt that the minute I walked in the door from Ron, and he's been that way ever since. And I have story after story of his kindness and generosity, things that would just shock people. But in some cases, it was just small stuff. They might go off on a trip and they would bring back a little toy for my son. One time they went to Italy and they got a bag monogrammed for my daughter in Italy and brought it back. So it wasn't these like $1 million things or $10,000 things. It was just when they were away from me, they were thinking about me. And that happened my entire time here. Yeah. And even Ron's generosity to just give away everything he knew and learned. I oversee the marketing for all the companies now, but for a very long time, there was one company, and it was Betenbough Homes. And I oversaw the marketing there for about 6 to 8 years, and then took over sales for the company. And I had no background in sales, but Ron took the time to tell me everything that he knew and share with me his relational style of leadership. And so he's had a tremendous impact on me. He has loved me at my worst and at my best. And so it had an impact on me that I couldn't ignore. And then the company decided in 2007 that they were going to send people on mission trips around the world. And they just wanted people to see what some of our external giving, where we were giving to and what was happening.
So
and just be inspired by
what was your take on that?
It was like, hey, we get a free trip. It was 100%. I mean, it really was at the time. It was like, you're telling me I can go to Africa or Brazil for nothing. All I had to buy was a passport.
Wow.
And I thought, that's really cool. I had a desire to travel. So I just thought, well, man, that sounds really fun. And I had no idea what was waiting for me in the Amazon. That's where I chose to go. I actually thought that would be the trip that wasn't roughing it. I was wrong. I thought Africa would be tough. Nope. Took my sister. My oldest sister went with me. She's 15 years older than I am. She had never been on a mission trip. And she, over her years, has developed a heart for the Lord. And so I brought her with me. And we went there, and, we were just at a village listening to story after story and seeing the way that the Lord had worked in people's lives. And it just broke me. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Makes me cry still. Because I didn't know what that was. But just, the impact was huge for me because the Lord had been for a year just planting seeds and watering them through the people around here. Right before that trip, I found out I was going to have my gallbladder removed. And man, after that Brazil trip, I was getting married 5 weeks later. And so it was just all these things were coming up on us financially. And my friend that was the ministry coordinator at the time, she just asked me what was wrong. She saw me crying about it, panicked basically because I couldn't afford the surgery. We were paying for a wedding. And the next day I had cash in my mailbox from a guardian angel to pay for that surgery. And
Unreal.
What do you even do with that when you've never felt that kind of love? I could not explain that. I remember calling my mom immediately because I'm like, do I give it back? Who do I give it to? I don't even know where it came from.
That's wild.
And just because I know her so well, I know now it was Holly Betenbough. And she was showing up too all along the way. My mom was sick a few times. My mom's had cancer a few times now, actually, different types. Holly has been at the hospital every time. And she doesn't tell me she's coming. She just somehow finds out and then she's there. And so a lot of those moments happened over time. And then in Brazil, the Lord was just there waiting on me. And I was open to it because of the love that I have felt around here.
So go back for just a second, Jenna, and you said all of this, but I want to kind of paraphrase real quick. You came into the company in 06, end of 06. You're engaged. You have a religion, not a relationship at this point. You've been in the company for a year or so, watching things happen. You get a free trip to go somewhere. Didn't really matter to you where. It's just free travel, right? From your perspective in that moment, it was not about, here, I get to go give back and serve and, and show God's love. It was, I'm working for a business that is providing this, so I'm going to take advantage of it and see what happens. And you're on this trip, you meet God in person, and things, I may have lost some of the timeline, but you start seeing so many things happening all around you. But let's keep in mind, these are all business people, right? That you're not talking about a church you've walked into and joined. You're talking about a business that is just taking, and not just a struggling business, but one that's been successful, is thriving, is growing, has plenty of things to worry about other than this, and yet little personal touches, little opportunities to show love. What are you telling other people outside the company at this point? How would you have described it then? That you found some Twilight Zone? I mean, how would you tell them?
Yeah, I would tell them it's kind of like a family. Like, I don't know what to call this, but I thought they have a really unique culture. My PR background, Starbucks was one of my main customers. And so I think at the time I was thinking, well, they have this brand and they just know their brand really well. I didn't feel any pressure, by the way. We prayed in meetings. I didn't feel pressured by that. That I had to participate in anything. Everything was optional. And so, a lot of this stuff was happening in business hours. It wasn't it just was not uncommon to just be in the kitchen talking to someone and learning about their life. And it almost felt like that's what you were supposed to do. And for me, that is naturally who I am. And so when I stepped in, I would just tell people it's the best place to work ever. I mean, who would help someone pay for their surgery?
Yeah.
They didn't have to do that.
So I'm
but it
curious.
was like, these people.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. So these people care.
People just truly care. They truly care about one another, just as much as they do their own family. And so I knew I had found something that was very rare and precious.
So your fiance at the time, is he now your husband?
He is almost my husband. When I'm in Brazil, we were getting married 6 weeks later. So yes, he's now my husband. We've been married for 14 years now.
Right. So I know a little bit about your story with him and his story. So kind of go into that, but start off, as I assume you guys are talking quite frequently, right? You're engaged, you're going to be married soon. You're starting to see all these things happen. And what was his faith position at the time, and how are you communicating what you're experiencing? That's not just activity, it's internal, right? It's real. How are you communicating that to him, and what is his response at the time?
Yeah, I will never forget when I first started, and we did a lot of external giving, which we still do, but it was on a regular basis. We had different missionaries coming to Lubbock, Texas, and they would sit and have a meal with us, and then they would present, their needs and ask for funding, and that was called Ministry Council. And so the employees were allowed to come and eat dinner on Friday nights and then listen to those. And I did have a heart for service. And my husband is one of the most genuinely kind people that you could ever possibly meet. And he does too. And so we would come to these ministry council meetings. We just thought, wow, this is so neat that what I'm doing in my work is impacting more than just my team members around me, the homeowners, but it's actually helping so many people that are in need. And I remember the first time he met Holly Betenbough at one of those things, he was just like, that can't be real. Nobody is that nice. And he'll tell that story. And the truth is, she is who she is.
Yeah.
She is.
And still to this day, but we had never encountered somebody like that. I mean, she was just filled with the Holy Spirit, and we didn't know what to make of it. But we got to watch her walk in that now for almost 15 years. And so honestly, he was skeptical.
Sure.
My husband lived in Dallas for a little while, and then his dad had an opportunity to move to Saudi Arabia. And so most of his formative years were in Saudi. And there's a lot of religion there. And he will tell you that what he experienced was hardcore religion, some really scary stuff, and he would talk about that his dad was told that he couldn't bring a Bible with him. And so my father-in-law, what did he do? He brought a Bible with him. And that's actually when he started reading the Bible. He had never read it before. But by this time, Andrew's 9 years old. And he grows up, and he's got lots of different religions around him, honestly, Buddhist, Muslim. There were people from all over the world that lived on their compound. And so that was just it to him. It was religion, and it was kind of scary. There were just some strange things that they would do with kids, scare tactics. And so that's all it was to him. And he had no interest in faith whatsoever. And then he moves back to the States. When you're about 15 in Saudi, they don't really want teenagers. Teenagers come with issues. And so they will pay for you to go to boarding school anywhere in the world.
Wow.
And so Andrew went to boarding school in Faribault, Minnesota. And really it was an Episcopalian school. But honestly, when I met him, he thought it was Catholic. I mean, he just didn't have a clue. And most people there weren't of faith. They were forced to go to mass and things, but he really just had no interest. And so as this is all happening to me, if I'm honest, I'm a little scared to talk to him about it.
Sure. I can imagine.
Because I'm like, he's not going to understand. I don't know what to do here. And I'm still growing in it. I'm having to call my sister to ask her things. I'm trying to get comfortable with some stuff that in my Catholic faith I wouldn't have been comfortable with. It's just such a learning curve. So I feel like the first couple of years I was just processing it myself and trying to read the Bible and say, well, how does that apply to me in my everyday life? And then started to live it out. And we were married for a few years, honestly, and we decided, you know what, we think we're ready to have a family. And for me, after I had my daughter, and Andrew knew he was coming to church with me at our local church. And he's, like I said, he's a precious person. So he's going to do that to support his wife.
Right.
But my dad did that too. He went to mass with us, but he had no interest. I was aware of that. And I didn't really want that for my family. And so there was just one night that on the floor, I just started crying, and our daughter was probably 3 months old. And I just said, I really don't want that to be the same for my daughter as it was for me. And could you just be open to actually listening? He was coming to church, but he wasn't listening. He was very standoffish. And I said, I just don't know how to do this. And in my heart, I was really dealing with we're not equally yoked.
Right.
But the problem was we were equally yoked when we got married.
Yeah.
And so I would ask the Lord all the time, just in moments on how can I love Andrew well through this, and what should this be like? And not long after that conversation, I went to dinner with a friend. And the night before, I had this very vivid dream of them being baptized together, my daughter and him. And she was like 8. And so at the time, she's 3 months old. She's tiny. And I held on to that dream for so long, just so long. It still makes me cry because of God's faithfulness. And he just let me be me. There was freedom in that, because there were moments that I would think, am I doing enough? But the people here, they would teach me so much about what it looked like to live out your faith, and that there's freedom. When you have a relationship with the Lord, there is freedom in that. And so we walked that journey for years, for 12 years, from the time that I really came to Christ. And then in 2019, Andrew and I and our daughter, Olivia, were all baptized, and she was 8 years old at the time. And so I held on to God's promises that whole time. And there'd be moments that I would just be like, it's not working, Lord. And in April of the year that he came to the Lord, which was, I think, 2018 now, I stood up on stage at we have a Kingdom at Work movement that many of you are probably familiar with. And I get to speak on a kingdom culture and the impact that it has had on people just like myself. And I remember saying on the stage and telling people, like, I'm not going to give up. God gave me this promise. And I believe fully that he is going to say yes and amen to this. And I walked off the stage, and this lady, Becky, at my table said, Gina, as you were up there praying, the Lord told me he's just waiting for an invitation. And if I'm honest, in my flesh, I was like, there's no way. She wasn't in our home this week. She wasn't at church with us this week. And a month to the day, my husband came to the Lord when we were in Holland at a Kingdom at Work. Wow. And it just was a beautiful reminder to me that the Lord is always inviting people, just saying, come and see what I have for you. And so he did, and everything has changed in our lives since then, just everything. And so,
that's unreal.
Gosh.
That's unreal.
Thank you for sharing that, by the way. I know it's just emotional, obviously, and it's meaningful to you, but I appreciate you being so transparent there.
It's amazing how a caring culture at work can transform a home. It's not just changing employees, but it has a ripple effect just through a whole community.
Yeah, and our kids and their faith, I'm watching my daughter, and her faith is so strong, and she's 10 now. And from the time she was 5, she was drawing prophetic pictures, and she just has this depth of knowledge and relationship with the Lord, and because she sees both of us doing it, and I've had to make some major decisions professionally, and now my husband and I pray through those together, and I get wisdom and insight from him on what we're supposed to do for our family. And I have to be honest, I only can be vulnerable and only even know about praying together with your spouse because of Betenbough Companies.
Yeah.
I've watched Holly and Rick. I've watched Ron and his wife, Connie, and they have been examples and mentors in all of this. And there's just a whole host of people that I could talk about here that prayed for my husband. They were always there for me, and I never felt judgment at any moment, whether it was for me walking in the door or for Andrew. It was just kindness, in small ways and big ways.
The first time I met Holly for any extended period of time, it was probably 8 or 10 of us in a board meeting room, and she and Rick were there, and he spoke a little bit, and then she did. And one of the things that she said, she quoted, that I'll never forget. She quoted the verse that says, "Don't just care about them, or don't just pretend to care about them, but really care." Right? And I had not even remembered that verse in Scripture, and went back and read. She quoted it right. But that's what you're saying. It's not just pretend that you care. Don't just do things for your employees or for your coworkers or for your customers, but actually care. And when you actually care, guys like Andrew will see it and say, first of all, that looks fake, or that can't possibly be real. But over time, consistent behavior, you begin to trust, right? And I assume that's had to have played into his decision when it finally came.
Oh, absolutely. He was watching it from so many people. Kerry Ritchie is a longtime team member here. He's been here 25 years. He's one of my mentors here. He was watching Kerry and his wife, Stephanie, love on our family. And look, there were some tough conversations I've had. Businesses come with accountability and,
Sure.
Discipline and correction. And that's all a part of really loving people. And so it's just been a blessing for Andrew to be watching that on the outside, just be on the peripheral. And he loves me, so he wants to be on my side, but he knows the truth, And so he's gotten to watch them just walk through difficult situations, through joyful situations. And it's just been an honor. I mean, I've had a wedding shower and 3 baby showers here. and we do that all the time. And it was I just could not believe the amount of generosity of this place for us. And we had 3 kids in 3.5 years. So it felt like we were on this regular rhythm. And we were like, hey, y'all don't throw one. Please don't throw another baby shower. Like we just had a boy. We're having another boy. But they weren't going to do it.
Yeah.
They loved us too much and were so invested in us and our kids. And so it's just been the sweetest thing.
There's a lot of talk about work-life balance as if those are, 2 different things, that work and family and personal life should be completely separate. But when you have a company that has a caring culture and is mission-minded and loves their people, you can integrate those 2 worlds together in loving ways and actually bring the family in as part of the business and let the business be a part of the family in good, healthy ways. Sounds like that's what they've done.
Yeah, I think what I love is that our time together doesn't fit nice and neatly in 8 to 5.
Wow.
And we're going to find ways to be together outside of here, because when you are with loving and caring people, you don't want that to stop at 5 o'clock.
That's a
true.
great point. A lot of companies could say that the hours blend beyond 8 to 5, but it's not the same as what you're describing, right?
Exactly.
They're asking you to show up early and stay late and everything in between. But I just love hearing about the stories of what you guys are doing. And I know you've experienced it yourself, but I also know that you're turning around and doing it for those that report to you and those on your team and so forth. Anything stand out that you've been able to do, not to pat yourself on the back, but just basically carrying forward what they've modeled for you? Are there any stories or anything that you've seen in your team, or just an impact that you can see as that further ripple effect?
Yeah, I have so many. I've just had the honor of leading a lot of really awesome people here. And many of them actually are like directors with me now, which is a gift. I think the most recent story, just about God's faithfulness and being an obedient leader. We talk a lot about hearing from God. And in the past year, I was needing to hire a new leader for a brand new role that we had never had. And I don't know if I've spent as much time in prayer ever as I have for this role. It was just kind of a sensitive time for our company and for our team. And I just remember sitting down one day at a loss of what to do with a candidate that I have. When we're talking here, we tell people, don't hire someone unless you have fireworks. If fireworks are like going off in your head, then you need to hire that person. And I felt like I had sparklers. And so it was really confusing to me.
Wow.
And I didn't know what to do. I was like, there are these little sparklers going off, but not fireworks. But there was no reason to say no to this candidate in the natural. And I remember just feeling like I needed to just sit down and talk with the Lord. And I remember saying, Lord, would you just point me to a point in Scripture? I mean, I just was at a loss. And he immediately took me to a scripture that helped me make a decision. It was very clear once I got there that if I was to make this decision, at some point there was going to be an impasse and a separation. And it was so clear. And, that's a hard thing to do, to call someone and just decline them and really not have a good reason outside of, hey, the Lord. That's, our team. We're always talking about spiritual leadership. We're always trying to develop our spiritual leadership. But a lot of places outside of here, that's just hard for people to understand.
That's true.
I prayed over that situation, that call would be received well and that there would still be friendship there. This is a small town.
Yeah.
And our marketing community is small and tight. And I actually really, really respect this person. And the Lord has worked it out in the most beautiful way all along. He brought our newest leader, Jeff, to us through all of these conversations and situations. And the Lord was working on the back end with Jeff. He had actually come in early on the process and we declined him. And he felt like he had the job. And so his part of the story is how the Lord was working on his humility through it.
Wow.
And his pride. And so we both have this story to tell, and gosh, just so many more. We hired another leader recently, and we asked the Lord to give us, God, would you give us a picture? And he gave us a picture of Moses and Aaron. And we hired this person, and we told them why we thought that they were our next leader, and they just broke down crying. We told this whole story about how we got here. We've been praying for 6 weeks about this decision. And they go, oh my gosh, my entire Bible study is on Moses and Aaron.
Wow.
And so the Lord has just brought peace after peace. And then what he does is he just multiplies his impact. In that moment, both of my faith grew and her faith grew.
Sure.
That's incredible. It's amazing what God will do when you invite him into your company and say, Holy Spirit, be a part of this and just guide us. What would you say to a business leader? Because this is a common objection for people who are I love God. I'm a disciple of Jesus. I do the church duties that I need to do, but I'm really uncomfortable with bringing my faith into work, especially with people who might be like yourself when you first joined the company, who, maybe their faith isn't where my faith is. And I don't want to impose on them, and I don't want to be proselytizing and, all those objections. What would you say to someone who's maybe on the fence and wondering what their next steps are and what they should do?
Yeah, I think people sometimes overcomplicate these things. And I read recently that kindness is love in work clothes. And I thought, how interesting as a business leader who's called to spiritual leadership and is developing that just small acts of kindness. Actually, that's what happened to me. It was small acts of kindness. And so is there one person, Andy Stanley will always say, do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. Is there one person that you could show kindness to? Because if kindness and love in work clothes, then ultimately the Lord's love is going to be felt.
That's great.
And so don't overcomplicate it. Get out of your head, and just give it a try. I think the Lord, he continues to tell me, he's just saying, come and see what I have. And